camera go to sleep? Nah. Oh, okay. Well, we up on audio. Testing, testing. It's hot, man. It is. He was. Warming up.
Test. What's up, man? Test.
Oh yeah. I got good bars. Good audio bars.
All right, I see Jordan.
Hey.
You ever watch MASH? Hey, you ever watch MASH? Uh-uh. What? Yes, sir. Eric.
Hey.
Let me repeat what Vince just said. Clear communication here. Say that again, Vince. The last screen is not on that homepage link. It's not on the SCOE KMO tool page.
It's on the link. And actually, I had to sort the page by live events.
Okay. Yeah. Vince's point is that the main SCOE KMO page does not have all that. So you have to go to that specific page.
To get the live event.
To get the live event. Okay. Yeah, we're clear on that.
Yeah, we got sound. I can hear it right here. Listen. Jason, we have sound.
All right. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, Vince does.
You got sound.
You can hear it.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
I found it.
There you go. Yeah, Vince.
I heard that over here.
Hey, what's up, Sergeant Major? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. This is your wife, Robert.
And then McCall, get that somebody take care of that. Thank you.
Man, it's gonna be hot.
It is.
God.
What's up?
Hey, say hello. So Becky can see.
That's good.
What's going on, gentlemen?
Hey, what's up? Steve, how you doing?
I was about to say.
He can't get out of here?
I'm gonna mute my phone real quick.
I can pull the whole thing up right here on my phone.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing the audio. Talking at a normal volume, about 2 feet from the microphone.
We don't. If my office does the cleaning, but that's the problem. I mean, we're recording it, but you're right, and that's the problem. That's the problem. If you don't send it, it don't get done. Gracious, I'm telling you right now, unless you got older. You know, like,
Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fort Lee Army Band Quintet and percussionists are providing music for today's ceremony. The band is under the direction of Staff Sergeant Moldez. Ladies and gentlemen, today's ceremony will begin in 2 minutes. We would ask that you turn off all cellular phones for the duration of the ceremony. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Historical Highway Marker Unveiling Ceremony honoring the Women's Army Corps Training Center that was located at Camp Lee, Fort Lee, from 1948 to 1954. Please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the posting of the colors, ruffles and flourishes, the national anthem, and the invocation.
Right turn. March. Good on. Up. Grand post colors. Ready. Step. Ready. Seat. Ready. Step. Hit. Up. Order. Up. Mark time. March. Left turn. March. Forward. March. Left. 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 Left.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
invite you to pray in your own faith today as I pray in mine. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day. The sun warms our hearts as we remember with pride the dedication of the women who are part of the Women's Army Corps. Their service to our nation paved the way for women to be integrated completely into our armed forces. They were simply amazing, and we thank you for their love of country that they have modeled for us to this day. And as we continue to serve, raise up strong women leaders in our armed forces who will continue to shape our great nation. And Lord, watch over all of our soldiers and their families who are in harm's way today. Protect them and bring them home safely. I ask this in your most wonderful name. Amen.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Today we celebrate the unveiling of a Virginia Historical Highway marker that recognizes the presence of the Women's Army Corps Training Center here at Fort Lee. We would like to take a moment to welcome all of our special guests that are with us here today. Whether you came from near or far, we appreciate your presence here today and hope that you will enjoy this most meaningful ceremony this afternoon. The staff of the United States Army Women's Museum worked for a year to research and assemble the historical materials required by the state's Department of Historic Resources to have a marker placed. With funding provided by supporters of the museum, Friends of the Army Women's Museum Association was able to make it possible for the marker to be installed on Highway 36 at the Lee Avenue gate. We are also celebrating the U.S. Army Women's Museum's 15th year in Fort Lee. Originating at Fort McClellan, Alabama in 1955, the Women's Army Corps Museum captured the history and heritage of women in the Army. When a base realignment enclosure required a new home for the museum, Fort Lee was a perfect choice because of the historical connection to the WAC Training Center. In addition, Fort Lee is the home of the Logistics Corps, an Army element of which women have been an integral part since our nation's founding. It was said by the 45th Quartermaster General, Major General Wright, who welcomed the opportunity in 1999 to help preserve the history of the WAC. Many of you here may remember when the museum opened its doors 15 years ago this month. We are pleased to have Mr. Edward Mann, the chair of the Department of Historic Resources for the state of Virginia, to share a few remarks about the Historical Highway Marker Program. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mann.
Good afternoon. Hey, we're from Tidewater, Virginia. We can do better than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There we go. In the spirit of today, I avoid recognizing all the ranking state officials and participants who are here, but I do want to focus on three significant women who grace us today with their presence. The vivacious First Lady of Virginia, Dorothy McCullough. The member of delegates, Betsy Carr. And Julie Langdon, the ever diligent and knowledgeable director of the Department of Historic Resources. Now, General Dyson, I don't know whether you want me to claim you or not, or whether you want to claim me, but we may be related. But as an Army brat, I learned a long time ago I would never deign to call Lieutenant General cousin. I want to thank the Friends of the Army Women's Museum Foundation for making this day a reality, and the staff from the various offices here at Fort Lee who worked out all the details. The Virginia Historic Highway Marker Program began in 1927, making it one of the oldest in the nation. At the outset, the markers celebrated presidential sites, the legacy of the Civil War, and the great mansions of the Old Dominion. Over the past 25 years, we've widened the focus to cover a wide range of topics, such as the invention of the banjo, the development of Brunswick stew, civil rights leader Oliver Hill, country artist Patsy Cline, the many sides of Virginia's history. We now have nearly 2,500 markers on Virginia's roadways, and approximately 40 new markers are approved each year. So I bring greetings from the Department of Historic Resources, which shepherds the markers through the approval process. Yet the support, inspiration, and hard work from the public is what provides the vital link. The state government stopped funding new markers in 1976. We rely on history-minded and public-spirited individuals and groups like the Friends of the Army Women's Museum Foundation to sponsor and raise funds, helping us make this the best marker program in the country. And the state sets aside special funding for diversity markers to tell the stories of underrepresented groups and individuals whose stories might not otherwise be told. These include stories of African Americans, women, and Virginia Indians. Now, on a personal note, I have a very personal and close relationship to Fort Lee, for here it is where my grandfather and my father both enlisted into the Army. My grandfather served 20 years in the Quartermaster Corps, retiring as a lieutenant colonel, and for 15 years of its first 20 years, he was the curator of the Quartermaster Museum, that great building right over there. He undertook the fundraising and development for the first building, which was dedicated in 1963. Now let me stress why this is relevant today. My grandfather was not a trained historian. In fact, he only had a high school education. Yet he is what we would call today a proponent of public history. He was making history accessible and useful to the public through exhibits, interpretation, sites, and events. He loved his country, he loved the Army, he loved Virginia, and he loved this reason. Those are the reasons why the Historical Highway Marker Program exists. That is why the Quartermaster Museum and the Army Women's Museum exist, for they are the nexus where that passion for a people and its history become the opportunity to tell the story. Today, the story is the WACS, a national military initiative, and its significant local ties. This helps us appreciate that the individuals involved in that endeavor were not some faraway or mythic people. They were real individuals overcoming extraordinary circumstances, and they made a huge difference right here within sight of where we are sitting today. In closing, let me say that today we're doing our small part to assure that this very important story, their hard work, and their roots here at Fort Lee are remembered for all time coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. On June the 12th, 1948, the Women's Armed Services Integration Act was signed into law by President Truman. The Women's Army Corps, nicknamed WAC, had been a temporary measure to supplement forces during World War II, but was now a permanent part of the Army. Within days of the signing of the act, the director of the WAC, Colonel Mary Halloran, began moving women to Camp Lee, the new home for the WAC Training Center. Camp was already home to the Quartermaster School and the Adjutant General School. Plans to utilize Camp Lee as the site of the new WAC Training Center began in 1947. The installation's grounds and buildings had fallen into disrepair since the end of World War II, so there was much work to be done. The center was outfitted with everything from classrooms to barracks to a beauty parlor, social clubs, and a WAC chapel. By July of 1948, the officers and enlisted women who would conduct the training, administration, and supply operations began arriving. The training center was officially opened on October the 4th, 1948. The cadre were responsible for reception and processing of all new recruits for basic non-commissioned officer and reserve training and officer at school. Later, bivouac training, where women learned basic field living, became a requirement. Many significant events happened at the training center. General Omar Bradley, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and U.S. Representative Edith Noyes Rogers, who was responsible for the creation of the Women's Army Corps in 1942, visited the base and attended the first graduation ceremony for regular Army officer candidates. When the center opened, the Army's policy of racial segregation was still in place. After the issuing of Executive Order 9981, which called for the desegregation of Cloud and starring Rosalind Russell and Paul Douglas. This parody gives us many laughs, but not as many as the WAC serving here at the time, who, despite it being winter, had the parade field green, despite the fact that the film was in black and white. In all, about 30,000 WACs were trained at the center while it was here at Fort Dade. In 1954, the training center was moved to Fort McClellan and remained there until the disestablishment of the WAC in the summer of 1978. With us today are several women who came in as WACs and are still serving in the Army. Sergeant Major Velma Lyons, who joined the WAC in 1978 and trained at Fort McClellan, Alabama, in one of the last WAC classes, is a battalion sergeant major for the 401st Army Field Support Battalion, currently located at Camp Arifjan, Kuwait. She will now share her thoughts about her nearly 40 years of service in uniform.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant General Dyson, Major General Williams, Command Sergeant Major Bartee, First Lady McCullough, and distinguished guests. Thank you for this opportunity to be here today. I would like to thank God for his traveling mercy from Kuwait. I am both honored and humbled to be in the presence of so many veterans, especially the veterans of the Women's Army Corps. I want to begin by expressing my utmost respect and appreciation for my fellow veterans here today and all service men and women around the world. I also want to thank those who make a quiet and often overlooked sacrifice, the families who remain by our side and provide unequal love and support. I started my military career as a WAC in 1978 at Fort McClellan, Alabama. The decision to join the military was one of the best decisions I have ever made. Life continues making decisions from childhood through our golden years. Often, the decisions we must make can be very difficult and very serious, but all immensely rewarding. I would not be who I am today had it not been for the decision I made to serve in the military. Throughout my military career, my service as a WAC is very important to me. It prepared me for the many challenges I would come to face during my 38 years of military service. It also had a positive impact on my personal life. The Army taught me the values of discipline, teamwork, and sacrifice, values inherited in every branch of the military. This set the foundation for the kind of soldier I've always strived to be, the kind of person I've always tried to be. A good structure as sound as its foundation. The Army values are a big part of my life. They are my foundation. We all remember certain personal milestones that no matter how small they seem on paper, play significant roles in shaping our lives. I will always remember the moment I was assigned my own bed. When I joined the Women's Army Corps, I come from a large family of 15 siblings, and that was the first time I experienced sleeping in a bed by myself. Not having to share a bed with one of my sisters or cousins, biggest smile on my face. It was very important not to take my new luxury sleeping arrangements for granted. It was a responsibility I greatly appreciated. Keeping that bed made perfect, corners tight, pillows centered, and could flip on its surface, laid the foundation for a sense of duty and discipline that I have been able to carry throughout my military career. That bed also taught me an important lesson in camaraderie. As a woman who wore the WAC insignia, Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and war, when we pinned on the Pallas Athena, each of us felt very special. because we knew that it represented a unique group of women. In many ways, we felt empowered. I also knew that at that point forward, I was never alone. I served with 50 other females in my platoon, and we learned what teamwork meant during basic training. I am so thankful and proud of my teammates. The Army's greatest asset is its people. And when those people work together, America's Army is unstoppable. The Women's Army Corps paved the way for me to be the woman I am today. Although I wore the Palace Athena for a short time, I remember vividly the day we took it off and put on our new branch. For me, that was the Medical Corps. In many ways, I was saddened because I knew that was the passing of a historical moment. A short while afterwards, the WAC would be disestablished. I entered an army that had fundamentally changed that day. Women were fully integrated with their male counterparts. As I look back at my Army career, I realized that so many of the opportunities I was afforded in my career was because of the tremendous work of the women in the Women's Army Corps. Out there in the audience, Women's Army Corps contributed in making our Army the greatest Army in the world. We had a special bond. So I now would like to ask all of the WACs in the audience to please stand with me and cite the WAC Pledge of Allegiance. We pledge allegiance to the land we love and all we hold most dear, bequeathed to us by glorious past, to cherish and revere. We guard our precious heritage with pride and valor. We love, we pledge our faith anew. Thank you for reciting the pledge with me. Please be seated. That pledge meant a lot to me. At the end, it gave me somber moments. It let me know that it meant a lot then, and it still means a lot now. That's why I have to take a moment of silence just for me and to let you know that that pledge will forever be within my heart, be within my life. So I want to thank you all for everything you do. I would like to thank my husband and my mom for their support and love during this journey that I've had as a WAC and most definitely as a soldier. It has been an absolute honor to be here today in your presence. Army strong.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Lyons, for sharing your reflection of a WAC. Sergeant First Class Walker will now read a poem titled The Regular Army WAC.
The regular Army WAC. If the task at hand is an Army command, and the deadline is 0 hours, if the way is rough and orders are tough, and the need is for all-out power, and if every day brings a challenge our way, no matter what the score, count the mission won, for the job will be done by the Women's Army Corps. Pallas Athena, goddess of victory, history tells your story brave, and our own Statue of Liberty shows what we've sworn to say. Shout the word around, let the echo resound on every distant shore. Whether peace or war, there's a need evermore for the Women's Army Corps.
Thank you, Sergeant First Class Walker. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce the Commanding General of the Combined Armed Support Command, Major General Darrell K. Williams.
Well, good afternoon, and what a beautiful sunny day here in Central Virginia. After all of the rain we've had over the past month or so and projections, again for rain this weekend, I choose to believe that the heavens cleared the clouds and the rain specifically to honor today's event. And so first of all, I will say thank you again to Sergeant Major Lyon. What a beautiful tribute. Let's give her a round of applause. And I know this will take a minute, but there are so many people in the audience that we simply have to recognize today. First of all, the First Lady of Virginia, Mrs. McCullough. Please give her a round of applause. Senator Dance was going to be here today, but was not able to attend, I believe. Mayor Myers from Petersburg, all of our local council and community leaders, many of whom we just saw at a local council, military and civil council meeting. Thank you all for attending. Mr. Edward Mann, Virginia Department of History, this would not have happened without you. Thank you for coming today. Lieutenant General Dyson, here all the way from the Pentagon, is one of our senior-most female general officers in the Army, and I'm sure her legacy extends to the group that we're honoring today. Certainly to my sweetheart Myra, thank you for coming out today. Command Sergeant Major and Mrs. Bartee, representing all of the non-commissioned officers on Fort Lee, and his beautiful wife Pamela. Cedric Five Harmon, our Command Chief Warrant Officer representing our entire warrant officer population. Major General Retired Adolphi, thank you for coming. Major General Retired Edmonds, thank you for being here. Major General Retired Williams. All of our commandants and their team, the great quartermaster team, Brigadier General and Mrs. Kirkland, thank you for coming out today. Command Sergeant Major Sellers, the Command Sergeant Major for Quartermaster, who is largely responsible for the military arrangements for the event today. Go Ordnance, Mrs. Ryan, thank you for coming out, and Command Sergeant Major Morris. Regimentals, Transportation, the Chief of Transportation is off preparing for another ceremony being hosted within the next hour, but the great transportation team is here today. Our Garrison Command team, thank you for coming out and for helping to host this ceremony. Our tremendous tenants on this installation, such as Defense Contract Management Agency, Defense Commissary Agency, so many others. Command Sergeant Major Mrs. Hazard, thank you for coming all the way down from Northern Virginia to be here with us today. Other special guests, I know I did not mention them all. I apologize up front. Our 392nd Army Band, who always lend dignity to our ceremonies. Thank you. And to Fort Lee friends and family, and then most especially to all of our honored guests, the surviving members of the Women's Army Corps. Let's start off again by giving them a round of applause. Again, thank you all for being here today for this very special event and occasion. And a tip of the hat to everyone who worked so tirelessly to bring this extraordinarily important recognition ceremony into being. And so a year or so ago, this was merely a concept. And today we will recognize a group of soldiers who played such a vital role in shaping the history of our Army. In fact, the history of our nation. And so special thanks also to Dr. Bunnell and the Friends of the Army Women's Museum for everything that they have done to support our museum and to bring this event into being Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause. Dr. Benoit, please stand. But this would not have happened without her tremendous energy and foresight. Thank you. To the state of Virginia and all of these surrounding communities, thank you for your continued support of this installation, its troops, civilians, and families, and for the tremendous relationship that we continue to share. The thousands upon thousands of soldiers and troops of our military services have benefited from some of the very best community support anywhere in the United States of America, and so thank you for this special symbiotic relationship. And so today, we are all honored to bear witness to such a part of not only women's history, but the history of our Army and the history of our nation. And what a great backdrop we have to celebrate. And so in a few moments, our guest speaker will provide remarks about the significance of today's event in the Women's Army Corps. However, I'm also excited to announce that today's ceremony is also the kickoff event for the Camp Lee, Fort Lee Centennial Celebration. And so back in 1917, the War Department approved the construction of Camp Lee to serve as a mobilization training place for soldiers deploying to World War I. This began Fort Lee's long and storied history through World War II and many other conflicts, continuously rising to meet our nation's challenges even today. And so next summer, this base will celebrate 100 years of service here in Central Virginia, admittedly in between the war years of World War I and World War II, it was turned over to the National Park Service, but it continues to serve a very, very great role. And we are extremely proud of the significant role that the Women's Army Corps has played in the history and legacy of this magnificent post that you see today. So today marks the beginning, a year-long celebration of our centennial. And so centennial events we're planning our baton handoff ceremonies and so on the 2nd of July, we will receive the baton from Hopewell as they celebrate their centennial this year in July of 2016. We will also go to Fort Lee at July on the 4th, another event that will honor this year as well as next year. Then our annual New Year's reception will also pay tribute to that 100 years of service. And then this year as well, Kenner Army Health Clinic, which traces healthcare all the way back to World War I, but also stood up officially here in 1941, will celebrate its legacy. And so today, the Women's Historical Marker unveiling is the perfect way to get the ball rolling. The stories of women's achievements are an integral part, not only here at Camp Lee, but as I said, for our Army. The WAC has set the precedent for young female soldiers to be able to serve in all capacities in our Army, to include integration of women into combat units. We are indeed proud of that history. And now to the introduction of our guest speaker. As you can see within the program, there's no one else more fitting to preside over this great event than one of our senior-most female general officers, Lieutenant General Karen Dyson. General Dyson is the military deputy to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management and Comptroller. A daughter of a Special Forces officer, Lieutenant General Dyson was commissioned into the regular Army Finance Branch at Southwest Missouri State University. Lieutenant General Dyson commanded at all levels of the brigade, with command of the 266 Finance Command and Theater of Operations during her tenure there, and deployed in support of Central Command in Operations Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. In 2012, she became the first female finance officer to achieve the rank of Major General. She continued to shatter the record books when she became the first Lieutenant General in 2014. She is now one of 3 women on active duty to hold the rank of Lieutenant General. The Undersecretary of the Army, General Joseph Westfall, a former Undersecretary, once said that women in the armed forces are true pioneers. They travel through uncharted territory and confront change. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of those true pioneers, Lieutenant General Karen Dyson.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. What a great day it is to be a soldier in our Army. And although I don't normally say this, I have to say it on this occasion. What a great day it is to be a female soldier in our Army. General Williams, thank you so much for hosting this ceremony here today and for tying the unveiling of this historical highway marker to the centennial celebration of Fort Lee. You've given us a better appreciation for the role that Camp Lee and Fort Lee played in this beautiful region of our country and to the evolution before Fort Lee became the home of sustainment for our Army. I'd like to also welcome First Lady McAuliffe, the state and city officials who are here, fellow general officers, command sergeants major, distinguished guests, veterans, soldiers, members of sister services, community leaders, friends and family, and most importantly, the women who are members of the Women's Army Corps in former times. Thank you all for joining us to commemorate the dedicated and trailblazing service of so many women whose voluntary military service made a true difference in shaping our Army and in shaping our nation. Throughout our history, women have played a key role in supporting our nation's war efforts, and some indirectly. In World War I, about 1 million women stepped forward to fill jobs at home that were vacated by men who went to war, and jobs overseas in areas such as nursing, operating radios and telephones, and clerical work. Many of these women worked under contract or worked voluntarily without equal pay or legal status. After the war was over, many of the women returned to the home front and returned to their homes. Many of them did not receive any benefits for being a veteran. But their service had a profound impact on our nation. Their service most notably influenced getting the right to vote for women in the United States of America. In 1918, President Woodrow Wilson stood before the Congress and made the case in support of the women's right to vote. And what he said was, how can we deny women who have partnered with us in the greatest war of our generation, known at that time, how can we deny them the equality of citizenship that voting brings? The 19th Amendment was then passed in 1920, giving women the right to vote. Now, I offer this part of our history as a backdrop that gave many women an increased sense of citizenship and rights at a time when we were coming out of the greatest war the world had known. It wasn't many years later that we entered World War II, and we would again call upon our experiences and find that many women voluntarily stepped forward to fill jobs at home that were vacated by men mobilizing for war, and to fill jobs in forward deployed areas where women were allowed to serve in the military, not only in nursing, operating radios and telephones, but now also as pilots, parachute riggers, truck drivers, and instructors, and many more non-traditional jobs. Hundreds of thousands of women served in uniform through World War II, volunteering for service in the Navy Women's Reserves, the WAVE, the Marine Corps Women's Reserves, the Coast Guard Women's Reserves, the SPARS, the Women's Air Force Service Pilot, the WASP, the Army Nurse Corps, the Navy Nurse Corps, and of course, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. The Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was formed in the early 1940s. And it was an idea that was started by Congresswoman Edith Norris Rogers out of the state of Massachusetts. She met with then Chief of Staff of the Army, General George C. Marshall, and she informed him that she intended to introduce a bill in Congress that would establish an Army Women's Corps, separate and distinct from the existing Army Nurse Corps. Her intent was to make sure that if women were to serve our nation, that there would be a legal status, and that there would be rights, there would be equal pay, there would be pensions and disability benefits. She had learned from what had happened in World War I and wanted to make a correction in World War II. When President Roosevelt signed the bill into law in May of 1942, The first group that was authorized were 25,000 women to be recruited into the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. That goal of 25,000 prompting the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson at that time, to increase the goal to 150,000. Training site for women was Fort Des Moines, Iowa. And if you'd like to know a little bit about Fort Des Moines, Iowa, I met today Beverly Krieger, who's sitting in the second row. Ma'am, could you raise your hand? She was one of the first WACs to attend training at Fort Des Moines in But with so many women answering the call to duty, there soon became another game-changing turning point in our history of the Army. The opening of these combat positions will expand opportunities exponentially and will give women combat experience that they need to become the most senior leaders in our field. This historical highway marker that's located just outside Fort Lee, home of the Army Women's Museum, will tie the past to the present. People will stop and look at it and ask, what is the Women's Army Corps? They'll Google it on their phones or they'll ask Siri, and perhaps they'll be surprised to learn that while it wasn't always possible for women to be in the Army, American women found and to contribute requirement. In 1943, the name of the Women's Auxiliary Corps changed to the Women's Army Corps. The difference being that the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps worked with the Army, but was not in the Army. The Women's Army Corps was a recognition that women could be in the Army. A generation or two, that we became an integrated Army with women assigned and training in branches alongside. So I'm very thankful for the women who have served, influenced change in our Army nation. As I was commissioned and I grew up in the Army, I always had a female role model. Not in my unit. I'm actually probably an anomaly, having never worked for a female except once in the entire course of my career. But I had a female role model that I could look up to at a distance. And I could always find strength when I learned about them overcoming some of the hurdles that they had to overcome to serve in our Army. And now today, as a senior leader in our Army, I'm very humbled to serve with women who have served in combat units, and to be a part of an Army that is opening even more opportunities for women. The roots of successes that we will see unfold in the future coming out of these changes are here on Camp Lee, where the courageous, adventurous women answered the call to serve and made a true difference through their service in the Women's Army Corps. So as I close, I'd like to thank the Virginia Department of Historical Resources and the Department of Transportation, Mr. Mann, for approving this historical highway marker and for bringing visibility to this part of Virginia's and Fort Lee's proud history. And lastly, I'd also like to say that as we are on the eve of Memorial Day weekend, I ask that in your Memorial Day activities, whatever they are, that as you pause and you honor those who lost their lives in service to our nation, that you also remember the generations of courageous women who served in the Women's Army Corps and honored their service to our great nation. Thank you very much. Army strong.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Dyson, for those inspiring words. Ladies and gentlemen, the official party will now move to the unveiling area. They will be accompanied by Mrs. McAuliffe, First Lady of Virginia, the 53rd Quartermaster General, Brigadier General Ronald Kirkland, and the Director of the U.S. Army Women's Museum, Dr. Francois Bonnell. The historical marker will now be unveiled.
Here we go. The whites are ready. Their bosses lead. 1, 2, 3. Service. We're in the heart and soul between. It's our only goal. We love our country's honor, and we'll defend it against any foe.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of the Army song.
March along, sing a song, we're the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence, started strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. We would like to ask the current and former WACs to come forward to the marker for a photo with the official party. The U.S. Army Women's Museum thanks you for your attendance this afternoon and invites you to a reception at the museum across the street.
Well, I spotted you guys a mile away. Good job. Hey! Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.